Series on
This
John
meeting is
to our
being
recent trip
recorded.
to Israel, because I can't help myself really. Just about every passage I've read, I've seen things that have reminded me of events that happened as we were travelling through Israel just a few weeks back. And that happened again today as I read John chapter 10. What immediately came to mind was our bus drive from Jerusalem, which was up high in one of the higher parts of Israel, all the way down to Jericho, near the Dead Sea, which is way down low. That's below sea level. And so it's a journey downwards. And immediately after leaving the city, just almost as soon as we'd got out of what was obviously, the edge of the city, going east, down toward Jericho, we were into the desert area. Suddenly it changed and we were obviously in barren desert, with a wilderness as it's commonly referred to in the Bible. And looking out the bus window at the dry, barren, rocky, inhospitable land, I was startled to see a line of what looked to me like goats walking along, not far from the edge of the highway, walking along the side of the hillside. They were probably actually sheep, but they looked like goats to me. And up front of them was a shepherd, a Bedouin shepherd with a stick, and they were following along behind him. It was as if our bus had suddenly been transported in time back to Jesus' days. I just hadn't expected to be seeing the sight not far out of the city of Jerusalem. And so this isn't actually the photo that I saw, but what I saw out the bus window, that's from what we've just been watching. But that's not too different to what I saw out the bus window walking along the side of the highway on our way down to Jericho. Our tour guide explained that what we were seeing was a Bedouin shepherd with his flock of sheep, and there are many Bedouin communities around that region that are living and farming in the wilderness area outside of the city of Jerusalem. And about halfway down on our journey towards Jericho, the bus turned off the highway and went off on a side road, a gravel road, dusty, unsealed road, into a lookout point where we got this spectacular view out over the wilderness area. And that's what we saw. That's what we looked around at. Below us was the road that we were told is the old road from Jericho to Jerusalem, the road that Jesus talked about in the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I was staggered at just how hot and dry and barren, rocky, inhospitable this wilderness area is, this desert area, which is the area where they believe Jesus went into somewhere near here on his fasting after he'd been baptized. I was just amazed at just how dry it was. How on earth could anything live and survive and be there? We were just about to get back in the bus when out of the corner of my eye I noticed this. And I remembered seeing a picture of something like this in a biblical commentary or somewhere, or maybe it was online, I don't really remember, but I immediately knew what it was. I wonder if you can guess what this is. It's a sheep pen, not a sheep pen like we would have back in New Zealand. We don't use anything like that. We use wooden gates and wire fences and things like that. But this is a sheep pen that as is used over in Israel. The kind of sheep pen that shepherds back in Jesus' time brought their sheep into for shelter at the end of the day and then led them out from in the morning to find pasture for their sheep. Notice the single entrance into this sheep pen. That's quite critical to the Bible reading we've just read, and I'll explain about that later. And notice how the roof isn't fully enclosed. I think most of them actually would have had no roof, but this one's partially got a roof, but it's definitely not fully enclosed. That's important to this Bible passage as well. Of course, John 10, 1-21, that we've just heard read and seen acted out, isn't really about Bedouin shepherd practices. It's a parable Jesus told to help his disciples tell the difference between the good shepherd and the bad ones, so that they would follow the good shepherd into fullness of life. That's why he was telling this parable, which is what we're going to be looking at this morning. We're going to learn how to tell the difference between a good shepherd and the bad ones, so that we may follow the good shepherd into fullness of life. So perhaps a little like a forensic police officer. We have a forensic scientist in our midst here, Anna's one of them. But perhaps a bit like a forensic police officer profiling a couple of wanted people. Let's begin profiling the characteristics of the good shepherd versus the bad shepherd, so that we can tell the difference between the two, because Jesus wants us to be able to tell the difference between the two. According to the profile Jesus gave, the good shepherd enters through the gate and the gatekeeper opens the gate for him. But then after entering through the gate, the good shepherd actually becomes the gate. What on earth did Jesus mean by that? Well, here's where my photo of the Bedouin sheep pen can help us out a bit. The opening at the front is where the sheep enter the sheep pen. It's the only way they can get in. Once they're safely inside, the shepherd would either place some branches or rocks or thorny bushes on the entrance as a gate to keep the sheep in and to keep anything bad out, or a shepherd would sit in the entrance as the gatekeeper. At night, after the sheep had been brought back in, it was difficult recognizing someone in the dark because it gets very, very dark out there, no street lights. And so it would be difficult to distinguish between a friend or an enemy as somebody turned up unexpectedly in the night. However, the gatekeeper in Jesus' parable recognized the approaching shepherd as a good shepherd and lets him in through the entrance of the sheep pen to be inside with the sheep. That's what's going on in this parable Jesus is telling. But then once inside, the good shepherd takes over from the gatekeeper to actually become the gatekeeper. Now, at this point, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, that Jesus isn't actually talking about sheep anymore. Especially when he says, I am the gate, whoever enters through me will be saved. So Jesus profiled the good shepherd as the gateway to salvation. And he wants us to know that so that we can go through the gateway to salvation. But how does that compare with the bad shepherd? Here's where my Bedouin sheep pen photo comes in handy yet again. Or I reckon it does anyway. Remember I said, notice how the roof of the sheep pen isn't actually fully enclosed? I mean, it partially is. I think that's more for shade than anything. But if we'd been able to look into it, we could have seen right inside that right-hand side. It's completely open. Once again, it's obvious that Jesus isn't actually talking about shepherds and sheep. He's profiling the bad shepherd as an intruder who wasn't let in through the gate by the gatekeeper, through that main entranceway there, like Jesus was, but has climbed in over the wall to steal some sheep, probably. So there's this distinct difference, isn't there, between the good shepherd Jesus who went in through the entranceway, who becomes the gate or the gatekeeper, and the bad shepherd who climbs in a different way, climbs over the wall and climbs in with an ulterior motive to steal the sheep. So do you know that the good shepherd as the gateway to eternal life? Do you? Do you really? Because it's important that we do, isn't it? Now, it was dangerous work being a shepherd back in Jesus' time, far more dangerous than it is here being a shepherd in New Zealand when we've got all the comforts of modern technology and tractors and quad bikes and warm gear to wear, and we're in a country that's nowhere near as inhospitable as it was over in Israel. It was dangerous work being a shepherd back in Jesus' time. Not only was there the threat of intruders who were out to steal the sheep, and that did happen, there were also dangerous wild animals back then, wolves and mountain lions and bears that liked eating sheep. Hence, it was common practice for the shepherd guarding the entranceway to the sheep pen to protect the flock from any predator. And should a dangerous predator come along and attack the sheep, the good shepherd was ready and willing to lay down his life to defend the sheep. He was a defender. We catch a glimpse of this kind of life-risking shepherding when young David put forward his shepherding credentials as qualification for going out to fight Goliath. He matter-of-factly told King Saul, "I've successfully defended my father's sheep against an attacking lion and a dangerous bear by putting my life on the line to chase after it. And when the animal turned on me, I fought and killed it to rescue the sheep from its mouth," he said. And then David famously concluded, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine." Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Jesus profiled the good shepherd as a defender of the sheep, ready to risk his life so that they would come to no harm. Whereas he profiles the bad shepherd as behaving like a hired hand does when faced with danger. In contrast to the good shepherd, the hired hand has no sense of responsibility for the welfare of the sheep. So when he sees a wolf coming or some other dangerous animal like that, what does he do? He abandons the sheep and he runs away. No intention of laying down his life for the sake of the sheep. He'll get out of there for his own safety. Jesus profiled the good shepherd as a life-risking defender of the sheep, willing to lay down his very own life for the good of the sheep. Whereas he profiled the bad shepherd as a deserter of the sheep. Do you know the good shepherd who gave up his life for you? Because Jesus wants us to know this good shepherd who gave up his life for each and every one of you. When I looked out the bus window and saw that scene of the flock of sheep following along behind the shepherd that was leading the way, I just couldn't believe how rocky and desolate it was. I found it hard to believe there was enough vegetation anywhere in that desert for these sheep to survive off. Nothing like our lush green paddocks that sheep roam the hills kind of by themselves, just kept there by fences. Nothing like that at all. This was dry, barren desert. How on earth did they find anything to eat there? But that's where the skill of the good shepherd comes in. Experienced shepherds know where all the best places are, where the desert tussock grass grows and the sheep can eat it. That's where the shepherd I saw out the bus window would have been leading his sheep to, somewhere where he knew there was good pasture for them, even though I couldn't see where on earth that would be. Jesus profiled the good shepherd as the nourisher who leads them out to good pasture and then brings them back in at the end of the day to the safety of the sheep pen. This is the daily cycle that's going on, and people would have been very familiar to that as he told this parable. The sheep being led out to find good pasture through the day where they're nourished and fed, and then brought back into the safety of the sheep pen at the end of the day. But in contrast to that, Jesus profiles the bad shepherd as a destroyer who comes to kill and destroy. Jesus said, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, whereas I have come that they may have life and have it to the full," he said. So do you know the good shepherd who nourishes you to the full? And when he says to the full, he really means that. Will nourish you in every possible way, every area of our human need. Our physical, our emotional, our relational, our spiritual. He nourishes us. He nourishes us with his fullness. Perhaps the most striking contrast between the profile of the good shepherd and the profile of the bad shepherd is how well they each know their sheep. Jesus says the good shepherd knows each one by name, and they listen to his voice when he calls them, and he leads them out to the pasture. By name he calls them, and out they go. Then once he's brought out all his own sheep, catch myself up with the slides. Then once he's brought out all of his own sheep, he goes on ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know the sound of his voice. This is someone familiar to them, somebody they know and know very well, and he knows them very well. And so out they go when he calls them out to find good pasture to eat through the day. Jesus profiled the Good Shepherd as being familiar with his sheep. And the sheep are familiar with the Good Shepherd. They know each other well, you could say. But not so the bad shepherd. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus said, since the bad shepherd is a stranger to the sheep, they will never follow his voice. And in fact, they will run away from him because they're unfamiliar with the sound of this stranger's voice that they're hearing, trying to call them out to follow them. And so they won't go. In contrast to the good shepherd who is familiar with his sheep, knows them very well, Jesus profiled the bad shepherd as an alienator to the sheep. Now, I came across an interesting illustration of this as I was doing a little bit of reading on this passage. It's an illustration of how well Palestinian sheep, with the Palestinian way of shepherding, how they know their sheep and how they know the sound of their shepherd very, very well. The illustration goes like this, and it's a true one. During the Palestinian uprising in the late 1980s, the Israeli army decided to punish a village near Bethlehem for not paying their taxes, which the villagers claimed were financing the Israeli occupation of their village. And so this was a protest that they were carrying out because they didn't want their village occupied by the Israelis. The commanding officer rounded up all of the village animals and placed them in a large barbed wire pen. Later in the week, he was approached by a widow who pleaded with him to release her flock, as they were her only source of livelihood. And she was fast running out of an income to be able to sustain her family. He pointed to the sheep pen containing hundreds of sheep belonging to all the many shepherds of the village, and he laughed that it would be impossible for him to be able to separate her sheep from all of the rest, because he didn't know which were hers and which were the others. But she wasn't willing to give up that easily. So she persisted by asking, if I can separate my sheep from out of the rest, would you be willing to let me take my flock back home? He agreed, thinking that it would be impossible for her to do this, and it would be a bit of a laugh, a bit of a joke watching her have a go at doing that. So he ordered a soldier to open the gate to the sheep pen. And then, at the widow's instruction, her son produced a little flute, a little reed flute, and started playing a little tune over and over again, a repetitive tune that he has played and played. And as soon as he started playing on his little reed flute, some heads popped up in the sheep pen of some of the sheep that were in there. Popped up, twitched their ears, looked around. They recognised that sound and soon pushed their way through all of the rest of the sheep out to the entrance. And there was the little shepherd boy, ready and waiting, still playing his flute, and they lined up behind him as he started walking off home, taking all of their sheep, none of the others, they all stayed, all the way back home. True story. It's a wonderful illustration, I think, of the way the Palestinian shepherds use sound, use their voice, and the sheep know them and recognise them by the sound of their voice and follow them when they hear it. Are you familiar with the Good Shepherd's voice? Are you? Would you respond to his voice when he calls you out to follow him to green pastures, wherever it is he may be leading you? And when he calls you in again to the safety of the sheep pen, would you come in with him? Would you hear his voice and respond? The cycle of going out into the green pastures, coming back into the safety of the sheep pen. It's a cycle that applies to us as well, that backwards and forwards, following the voice of the shepherd who we recognise and follow. Jesus rounds off the profile of the Good Shepherd by characterising him as a unifier of different flocks. This is an interesting one. Jesus said, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd, he said. In contrast to the unifying qualities of the good shepherd, Jesus profiles the bad shepherd as a divider of the sheep. Jesus said that when the sheep hear his voice, they run away, and when the wolf attacks the flock, they scatter. The bad shepherd is a divider, a scatterer, if that's a word, of the sheep. No unifying qualities at all in the bad shepherd. Last Sunday night, Raymond and I had Gordon Stewart for dinner just before he headed off to Jordan, where he is right now. We had him around for dinner so that we could catch up because he was very interested in our recent trip to Israel, and he's taken tour groups there before and wanted to compare notes a little bit with what we'd seen and what he'd done on his tours. During our conversation, he mentioned an amazing unifying work that's being done between a Kiwi Messianic pastor named Evan Thomas and a Palestinian Christian leader named Salim Munaya. Their organisation is called Musala, which means reconciliation in, I believe, in both Hebrew and Arabic. Michael, you might be able to confirm whether it is in both or whether it's just in Arabic. Musala is a faith-based charitable organisation that teaches, trains and facilitates reconciliation between Israelis and Palestinians from diverse ethnic backgrounds and religious backgrounds. It's all based on biblical principles of reconciliation. Gordon enjoys taking his tour groups to visit their ministry to hear about the amazing reconciliation work that they're doing with Palestinians and Israelis. One of the projects Musala runs is a 5-day desert encounter where Jewish and Palestinian young adults go camping together out in the desert like we were seeing out the bus window and that site where we had a look around. As you know, Palestinian and Israelis wouldn't normally go camping together. In fact, they wouldn't normally have anything to do with each other. But through Musala's desert encounter camps, they do. And that's a photo up there of some young adult Palestinians and Jews on a desert encounter camp together. Gordon told us that the change of attitude between these two racial enemies after going camping in the desert together is simply amazing. However, the Musala ministry cops lots of criticism for the work they're doing from both sides for running these camps who think that kind of thing shouldn't be going on. Yet they keep on running their camps and have done for the past 31 years because it's helping young Palestinians and Israelis make friends with each other and reconcile. As these two pastors and their teams of helpers from their two different flocks, one flock being the Messianic Jewish flock, the other being the Palestinian Christian flock, as they work together to run their desert encounter camps, their Israeli and Palestinian community with their Israeli and Palestinian communities, they demonstrate to the people around them, to both Palestinians and Israelis, to their neighbours and the communities around them who see what's going on. They demonstrate this unifying quality of the Good Shepherd, who unites the flocks together, who brings them under one flock, under one Good Shepherd, who we know is, of course, our Lord Jesus Christ. The unity is also a reflection of the unity Jesus has with his Father, and that Jesus has with his flock. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. This wonderful unity, this wonderful bringing together that is exemplified in Jesus, our good shepherd, the unifier of the flock. Do you know the good shepherd who unifies his flocks? Do you? Are we seeing that happening, a unity, a unifying of the different ethnic groups of Christians who are actually all part of one big flock together, not separate, one separated out, but one big flock? Do we know Jesus, the unifier of the flocks? Sadly, most of the Pharisees who heard Jesus' parable about the good and the bad shepherd didn't get it. They didn't recognize themselves in his profile of the bad shepherd, And they certainly didn't recognize Jesus in the profile of the Good Shepherd. Do you get it? Do you get it, what this parable is all about? What Jesus is wanting us to know about him through this parable. Jesus told this parable to help his disciples tell the difference between the good shepherd and the bad shepherds, so that they would follow the good shepherd into fullness of life that he wants for all of us. But these contrasting profiles also help us tell the difference between good leaders and bad ones, so that we may follow good leaders who help us follow the Good Shepherd into fullness of life. So let's pray about that before we conclude our service this morning. Lord Jesus, you are our Good Shepherd. May we always recognize your voice and follow you out into the pastures you lead us to and back into the sheep pen of your flock. Thank you for laying down your life so that we may have fullness of life. Help us to tell the difference between the good shepherds and the bad ones, so that we may always follow you, Lord Jesus, into fullness of life. Jesus, you are the gateway to salvation. You are our life-risking defender. You nourish us with fullness of life. You are familiar with us and us with you. And you are the unifier of your flocks. We recognize you, Jesus, as our good shepherd. And we choose to follow you and only you. Amen.